everyone, before we dive into today's story, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now where you are? I love seeing how many amazing people tune in from all over the world. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, tap the like to you, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Let's get into it. Why don't we just talk this out over dinner like reasonable adults? My sister Gabriella said through the phone, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that always preceded something rotten. I stood in my apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma, staring at the stack of legal documents on my kitchen table. Documents that proved our father's house had been left solely to me. Documents that showed every dollar of the $350,000 in proceeds belonged to me alone. Documents my sister had been demanding I split with her for the past 3 weeks. I don't think there's anything to discuss, I replied, keeping my tone even. Dad's will was clear. Emily, please. Just one dinner. I want to apologize for how I've been acting. You're right. I've been pushy and unreasonable. Let me make it up to you. The words sounded sincere enough, but I knew Gabriella. I had known her for 29 years, 5 years longer than she'd known me. She didn't apologize. She maneuvered. She calculated. She won. But something in me was tired of fighting, tired of the constant texts, tired of the voicemails from relatives she'd recruited to pressure me. So against every instinct screaming in my head, I agreed. Fine. One dinner. Someplace public. Perfect. How about rustic table downtown? Tomorrow at 7 p.m.? I hesitated. Rustic table was nice, expensive. Not the kind of place Gabriella usually suggested, unless she wanted to impress someone or manipulate a situation. But it was public, well-lit, and always busy. Safe enough. Okay. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. She hung up before I could change my mind. I set my phone down and looked back at those documents. My father had been a complicated man. Distant with me, but never cruel. He worked in manufacturing his entire life, managing operations at Stone Ridge Data until his retirement. He saved every penny, lived modestly. And when he passed 6 months ago, he left me his house and everything in it. The will stated clearly that I was to receive the full estate, because I had been the one who cared for him during his final years. Gabriella had visited exactly twice in those 3 years. Once for Thanksgiving, once for his birthday. Both visits lasted less than 4 hours. But now that there was money involved, suddenly she remembered she had a father. Suddenly she remembered she had a sister who owed her something. I'd already sold the house. The money sat in my account, untouched, while I figured out what to do with it. Pay off my student loans, maybe invest, maybe travel. It didn't matter. It was mine to decide. The next evening I arrived at Rustic Table 5 minutes early. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing fancy. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I scanned the room and spotted Gabriella at a corner table, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile wide and fake as ever. Emily, you came. She stood and hugged me like we were long-lost friends instead of sisters who'd barely spoken since Dad's funeral. You asked me to, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm so glad we're doing this. Really. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I realize I haven't been fair to you. I nodded slowly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. With Gabriella, there was always another shoe. We ordered drinks. She ordered wine. I ordered water. We made small talk about work. She worked in pharmaceutical sales for Marison Pharmaceuticals, a job she'd bragged about for years but never seemed to actually enjoy. I worked as a logistics coordinator for Driftline Construction, managing supply chains and schedules. Boring, stable, reliable work that paid well enough. 5 minutes into our appetizers, the door opened, and a man walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark leather jacket and an expression that screamed trouble. He scanned the room, locked eyes with Gabriella, and walked directly to our table. Gabriella, he said, his voice low and rough. Victor, she replied, her smile faltering just slightly. This is my sister Emily. Victor looked at me with the kind of cold assessment that made my skin crawl. He didn't extend his hand. He didn't smile. He simply pulled out the empty chair at our table and sat down. Nice to meet you, I said, my voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Likewise, Victor replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. Gabriella shifted in her seat, suddenly looking less confident. Victor is a friend. He's here to help us work through some things. Work through what, exactly? I asked, folding my hands on the table. The house money, Gabriella said quickly. I thought having a neutral third party might help. I glanced at Victor again. Neutral third party. Right. This man looked about as neutral as a loaded gun. I don't need a mediator, I said calmly. There's nothing to mediate. Dad's will was clear. Gabriella's smile tightened. Emily, please, don't be difficult. I'm not being difficult. I'm stating facts. Victor leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. He didn't say anything, but his presence alone was meant to be a message, a threat, an implication that maybe I should reconsider my position. But here's the thing about me. I don't scare easily. I'd dealt with difficult contractors, aggressive clients, and tense negotiations in my job. I knew how to hold my ground. And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever game Gabriella was playing, I wasn't going to lose. So, I said, turning my attention fully to Victor. What exactly is your role here? He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. Gabriella jumped in. Victor is here to ensure we're all on the same page. That's all. And what page is that? She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table toward me. I just need you to sign this. It's a simple agreement. We split the house proceeds 50-50, fair and square. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't even look at it. Fair would be following Dad's will, I said, which left everything to me. Emily, come on. You can't seriously think it's right for you to keep all of it. I'm his daughter too. Then you should have visited him more than twice in 3 years. Her face flushed. Victor's expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes flicker with something. Annoyance? Doubt? I couldn't tell. Just sign the paper, Gabriella said, her voice dropping into something colder. It's easier for everyone if you just cooperate. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. This was the sister I'd grown up with. The one who borrowed my clothes without asking. The one who lied to our parents about me to avoid getting in trouble herself. The one who always found a way to get what she wanted. But not this time. No, I said simply. Gabriella's eyes narrowed. Victor shifted in his seat, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of genuine unease. Not because I thought he'd hurt me here, in a crowded restaurant, but because I realized how far Gabriella was willing to go. She leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Just sign it, Emily. Don't make this harder than it has to be. And that's when I laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a scared laugh. A genuine, amused laugh. Because in that moment, I realized something Gabriella didn't know. Something she couldn't have anticipated. I knew exactly who Victor worked for, and I had a date with his boss later that night. Growing up, Gabriella and I were never close. She was 5 years older, which meant she got the new clothes, the bigger room, the first choice in everything. I got the hand-me-downs, the smaller space, the leftovers of her childhood. Our parents didn't play favorites intentionally. They just didn't notice the imbalance. Or if they did, they didn't care enough to fix it. Gabriella was charming. She knew how to work a room, how to make people like her, how to get what she wanted without seeming selfish. I was quieter, more practical. Less interested in games and more interested in getting things done. It made us opposites in every way that mattered. When I was in high school, Gabriella borrowed $200 from me for what she claimed was an emergency. She never paid it back. When I asked about it months later, she accused me of being petty and holding grudges. Our mom sided with her, telling me that family didn't keep score. So I stopped asking. But I didn't forget. When I was in college, Gabriella called me crying because she'd gotten into debt with her credit cards. She begged me to help her. I sent her $500 from my part-time job savings. She promised to pay me back within 3 months. She never did. When I brought it up, she told me I was being dramatic and that she'd get to it eventually. She never did. When Dad got sick 3 years ago, I moved back to Tulsa to take care of him. Gabriella stayed in Oklahoma City, 2 hours away, and visited twice in 3 years. She said she was too busy with work, too stressed with her own life. She sent flowers once. I sent updates every week. She rarely responded. I gave up my apartment in Denver. I gave up a promising job at a larger construction firm. I gave up dating, social life, any semblance of normalcy to be there for Dad. I managed his medications, took him to doctor appointments, cooked his meals, helped him bathe when he became too weak to do it himself. I watched him deteriorate slowly, watched the light fade from his eyes, watched him struggle to remember my name some days. Gabriella sent a card on his birthday. It was late. The signature looked rushed. When Dad died, she showed up to the funeral in a designer dress and cried loudly enough for everyone to hear. People hugged her, told her how sorry they were, praised her for being so strong. I stood in the back, exhausted from months of caregiving, and watched her perform grief like it was a role in a play. And then the will was read. Everything to me. The house, the savings, the small investment accounts. All of it. The lawyer explained that Dad had been clear in his wishes. He wanted me to have it because I'd been there, because I'd sacrificed, because I'd cared. Gabriella's face went pale, then red, then cold. She didn't say anything that day. But 2 days later, the calls started. The texts, the voicemails. She demanded to know why I'd manipulated Dad, why I'd poisoned him against her, why I thought I deserved everything. I didn't respond at first. I thought maybe she'd calm down. Maybe she'd accept reality. But she didn't. She escalated. She called relatives and told them I'd stolen her inheritance. She posted vague messages on social media about betrayal and greed. She made me the villain in a story she'd written entirely in her head. And through it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself. I didn't engage. I just waited for her to run out of steam. But she never did. She only got louder, more insistent, more desperate, until now, until this dinner, until she brought Victor to intimidate me into signing away what was rightfully mine. I thought about all those years, all those times she'd taken from me and called it borrowing, all those moments she'd lied and called it protecting me, all those instances where she'd manipulated situations and called it being family. And I realized something. She'd never respected me. She'd never seen me as an equal. She'd always viewed me as someone she could control, someone she could push around, someone who would eventually give in because that's what I'd always done before. But not this time. Not with this. Not when Dad had trusted me enough to leave me everything. Not when I'd earned it by being there when no one else was. So when Gabriella leaned in and whispered, "Just sign it, Emily. Don't make this harder than it has to be," I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. I didn't even blink. Because I'd spent my whole life letting her win, and I was done. Victor's presence at the table was supposed to rattle me. I could see it in the way Gabriella kept glancing at him, waiting for him to do something, say something, anything that would tip the scales in her favor. But he just sat there, silent and watchful, like a guard dog waiting for a command. And the longer he stayed quiet, the more I realized something was off. He wasn't engaged. He wasn't interested. He looked almost uncomfortable. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and looked directly at Gabriella. Let me ask you something. Does Victor know why he's really here? Her eyes widened just a fraction. What are you talking about? Does he know you lied to him? That you told him some story to get him to show up and intimidate me? Because I'm guessing whatever you told him isn't the whole truth. Victor's gaze shifted to Gabriella. What's she talking about? Gabriella laughed nervously. Nothing. She's just trying to confuse things. Am I? I turned to Victor. What did she tell you? That I stole money from her? That I owe her something? That she just needs a little help getting what's rightfully hers? His jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. Gabriella had underestimated me, but she'd also underestimated him. He wasn't stupid. He knew when he was being played. Emily, stop, Gabriella said, her voice sharp. You're making this worse. Worse for who? I asked, my tone calm but firm. Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one who brought a stranger to a family dinner to pressure me into signing a document that has no legal standing. You're the one who's been harassing me for weeks. You're the one who can't accept that Dad made a choice. A choice you don't like, but a choice nonetheless. Gabriella's face flushed. You don't understand. You never understand. You think you're so perfect, so responsible, so deserving. But you're not. You manipulated him. You isolated him. You made him think I didn't care. I didn't have to make him think anything, I said quietly. You showed him exactly who you were. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Gabriella's hands clenched into fists on the table. And then I smiled. Because I realized she truly believed intimidation would work on me. She truly thought that bringing Victor, a man I didn't know, to this dinner would scare me into compliance. She truly thought I was still the little sister who handed over money without question, who let things go to keep the peace, who bent and bent until there was nothing left to give. But I wasn't that person anymore. And it was time she learned that. So, what exactly is it you want me to sign? I asked, my voice steady as I looked at the folded paper still sitting untouched on the table. Gabriella's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope, as if she thought I might actually be considering it. It's just a simple agreement. A document that says we're splitting the house proceeds evenly. 50-50. Fair and square. Fair, I repeated, letting the word hang there. You keep using that word like it means something different than what it actually means. Emily, come on, don't be like this. Be like what? Reasonable? Because I think I'm being incredibly reasonable by not throwing my drink in your face right now. Victor shifted in his seat again. I caught the movement out of the corner of my eye. He was watching Gabriella now, not me. And his expression had changed. The cold detachment was gone. Now, he just looked annoyed. Look, Gabriella said, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used when she wanted something. I know I haven't been the best sister. I know I should have been there more when Dad was sick. But I'm here now. And I need this money, Emily. I really need it. Need it for what? I asked. Your new car? Your designer handbags? Your weekend trips to Dallas? Her face flushed. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is you showing up after 3 years of nothing and demanding half of everything Dad left me. What's not fair is you lying to relatives and making me out to be some kind of villain. What's not fair is you bringing this man to intimidate me into signing away what's legally and morally mine. I didn't bring him to intimidate you, she said quickly, though her eyes betrayed the lie. I brought him to mediate. Mediate, I said flatly. Does he have a law degree I don't know about? Victor spoke for the first time in several minutes. I'm not a lawyer. Then what are you? I asked, turning my full attention to him. He hesitated. Gabriella jumped in before he could answer. He's a friend, someone who understands difficult situations. A friend, I repeated. Gabriella, you don't have friends. You have people you use. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Let me guess. You told him some sob story about how your terrible sister stole your inheritance. How you're broke and desperate, and just need a little help getting what's rightfully yours. And you probably promised him something in return. Money, maybe. Or a favor, something to make it worth his time to sit here and glare at me. Victor's jaw tightened. Bingo. That's not what happened, Gabriella said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what did happen? I pressed. What exactly did you tell him? She didn't answer. She just looked at Victor, her eyes pleading with him to back her up. But he didn't. He just sat there, stone-faced, clearly re-evaluating every decision that had led him to this table. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table in front of me. You know what? Let's call the lawyer who handled Dad's estate. Let's have him explain to Victor here exactly what the will said. Exactly who's entitled to what. Would that help clear things up? Emily, don't, Gabriella said quickly. There's no need for that. Why not? If you're so confident that you deserve half, then let's get a legal opinion. Right here, right now. She looked panicked. Her eyes darted around the restaurant like she was searching for an escape route. And that's when I knew for certain that she'd lied to Victor. That whatever story she'd fed him to get him here didn't match reality. And now she was trapped. Everyone agreed, she said suddenly, her voice rising slightly. Mom agreed. Aunt Beverly agreed. Everyone thinks we should split it. Mom's been dead for 4 years, I said coldly. And Aunt Beverly hasn't spoken to either of us since Dad's funeral, so who exactly is everyone? She didn't answer. I turned to Victor. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see how she's lying? She brought you here under false pretenses. Whatever she told you, it wasn't the truth. His expression darkened. What did you tell me, Gabriella? I told you the truth, she said quickly. I told you my sister was keeping money that should be split between us. That's the truth. No, I said firmly. That's a lie. The truth is that our father left me everything because I was the one who took care of him. I was the one who moved back here, who quit my job in Denver, who spent 3 years managing his medication, his appointments, his daily life while he was dying. Gabriella visited twice in 3 years. And now she wants half of what he left me because she thinks showing up to his funeral entitles her to something. Victor's gaze stayed locked on Gabriella. You told me she stole from you. She did, Gabriella insisted, though her voice wavered. She manipulated him. She isolated him. She turned him against me. I didn't have to turn him against you, I said quietly. You did that all on your own by not showing up. Silence settled over the table. Other diners were starting to glance our way, drawn by the tension radiating from our corner. The server who'd brought our appetizers earlier hovered near the bar, clearly unsure whether to approach. I could see Victor processing everything. Could see the doubt crystallizing into certainty. Could see him realizing that Gabriella had played him. And from the look on his face, he didn't appreciate being played. I tried calling you, Gabriella said, her voice desperate now. I tried reaching out to Dad. He never answered. He never returned my calls. Because you called twice, I said. Twice in 3 years. Both times asking for money. Not to see how he was doing. Not to offer help. Just to ask for a loan you had no intention of paying back. Her face went white. Victor stood abruptly. I'm done here, he said, his voice flat. Wait, Gabriella said, reaching for Victor's arm. Please, we had a deal. We had a deal based on information that's clearly not accurate, he said, shaking her off. You lied to me. You wasted my time. And you dragged me into something that's none of my business. Victor, please. I'll pay you double. I just need her to sign this. He looked down at her with something close to disgust. You don't have the money to pay me anything. I checked. You're broke, Gabriella. Whatever you promised me, you can't deliver. Her face went pale. How do you know that? Because I do my research before I agree to anything, he said flatly. Unlike you, apparently. He walked away without another word, leaving Gabriella and me alone at the table. She stared after him, her mouth hanging open, her carefully constructed plan crumbling in real time. I picked up my water glass and took a sip, letting the moment stretch. Well, that went well. She whipped her head around to glare at me. You ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I said calmly. You did. The moment you thought you could intimidate me into signing away my inheritance. I wasn't trying to intimidate you. I was trying to get what's fair. For the last time, Gabriella. What's fair is what Dad decided. Not what you want. Not what you think you deserve. What he chose to give me because I earned it. She slammed her hand on the table, drawing more stares from nearby tables. You think you're so smart. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm not done with this. I'm not done with you. Yes, you are, I said, meeting her gaze. Because there's nothing left to fight about. The will is final. The house is sold. The money is in my account. And no amount of scheming or lying or bringing scary men to dinner is going to change that. She stood, grabbing her purse. You're going to regret this. I doubt it, I said. But you're definitely going to regret the choices you've made. She stormed out of the restaurant, nearly knocking into a server on her way. I sat there for another moment, letting my heart rate settle, letting the adrenaline drain away, and then I picked up the folded paper she'd left behind. I opened it and scanned the contents. It was exactly what I'd expected. A hastily drafted agreement with no legal standing, full of vague language designed to trick me into signing away my rights. I folded it back up and slipped it into my purse. Evidence in case I ever needed it. The server approached cautiously. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said, handing her my credit card. Just a family disagreement. Nothing to worry about. She nodded, clearly relieved, and took the card to process the bill. I sat there alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of conversation and clinking silverware, and allowed myself a small smile. Victor hadn't gone far. I spotted him outside the restaurant as I left, leaning against the wall, smoking a cigarette. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. You handled that better than I expected, he said. Thanks, I think, I replied, stopping a few feet away. For what it's worth, I didn't know she was lying. Not completely anyway. She made it sound like you two had an agreement and you were backing out. That's her specialty, I said, making herself look like the victim. He took a drag from his cigarette, exhaling slowly. She still owes me money. Good luck collecting, I said. She's broke. Yeah, I figured that out. He flicked the cigarette away and straightened. You know who I work for? I have a pretty good idea, I said carefully. Then you know I don't usually get involved in family squabbles. This was a favor for someone who knows someone. But I'm not doing her any more favors. Glad to hear it, I said. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. You're tougher than you look. I get that a lot. He walked away without another word, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. And then I pulled out my phone and checked my messages. There was one from earlier that day, from someone named Alexander. Still on for drinks tonight? 8 p.m. at the Bell Tower? I smiled and typed a quick response. Absolutely. See you soon. Alexander and I had met 3 weeks ago at a work conference in Oklahoma City. He was visiting from out of state for business, something to do with logistics and distribution networks, though he'd been vague about the specifics. We'd struck up a conversation at the hotel bar, and one thing had led to another. He was older, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and a slight accent I couldn't quite place. Russian, maybe, or Eastern European. He was charming in a quiet way, confident without being arrogant, and he'd asked me to dinner tonight, which I'd agreed to before Gabriella's surprise invitation. What I hadn't told Gabriella, what I hadn't told anyone, was that Alexander wasn't just some guy I'd met at a bar. He was someone important, someone connected, someone who, I'd learned through careful conversation and a bit of online research, had ties to people who operated in the shadows of legitimate business. People like Victor. And when Victor had walked into that restaurant tonight, I'd recognized him immediately. Not because I'd met him before, but because Alexander had mentioned him in passing during one of our conversations. Had warned me, in that subtle way of his, that some of his employees could be a little overzealous, that if I ever had trouble with anyone connected to his organization, I should let him know immediately. So when Gabriella brought Victor to intimidate me, she'd unknowingly brought someone who answered to the man I was dating, and that was going to make tonight's drinks very interesting. I left the restaurant and drove across town to the Bell Tower, a sleek rooftop bar with views of the Tulsa skyline. It was the kind of place where people went to impress clients or celebrate promotions. Expensive drinks, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. Alexander was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a glass of whiskey in front of him. He stood as I approached, his smile warm and genuine. "Emily," he said, pulling out my chair. "You look lovely." "Thank you," I said, sitting down. "Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had an interesting dinner." "Interesting how?" he asked, settling back into his seat. "I'll tell you in a minute," I said, signaling the bartender. "But first I need a drink." He chuckled. "That kind of interesting. You have no idea." The bartender came over, and I ordered a glass of red wine. Alexander waited patiently, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, his eyes curious but not pushy. When the wine arrived, I took a sip and felt some of the tension from earlier start to melt away. And then I told him everything. The inheritance, Gabriella's harassment, the dinner, Victor's appearance, the confrontation, all of it. He listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from amused to concerned to something darker as I described Victor's role. "Victor," he said slowly when I finished. "Tall, broad shoulders, leather jacket." "That's him," I confirmed. His jaw tightened. "He works for me." "I know," I said, watching his reaction carefully. He set his glass down with deliberate care. "Did he threaten you?" "Not explicitly. He mostly just sat there and looked intimidating, but the intention was clear. Gabriella brought him to scare me into signing away my inheritance." Alexander's expression went cold, in a way I'd never seen before. The charming, easygoing man I'd been getting to know vanished, replaced by someone harder, someone dangerous. "That's unacceptable," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I handled it," I said quickly. He figured out pretty fast that Gabriella had lied to him. He left before things escalated. "That doesn't matter," Alexander said. "He had no business being there in the first place. He's not supposed to take side jobs without clearing them with me. And he's definitely not supposed to intimidate people connected to me." "Connected to you," I repeated. "Is that what I am?" His expression softened slightly. "If you want to be." I smiled despite myself. "I think I'd like that." He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. "I'm pulling him from active assignments until we have a conversation about boundaries." "You don't have to do that for me," I said. "I'm not doing it for you," he replied. I'm doing it because he crossed a line, and people who cross lines with me don't get second chances without consequences. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude, certainly, but also a sense of power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being pushed around. I wasn't the one scrambling to defend myself. I had someone in my corner who could make things happen, who could hold people accountable, who wouldn't let me be taken advantage of. And Gabriella had no idea. We spent the rest of the evening talking about lighter things. His business, my work, plans for the future. But underneath it all, I could feel the shift. The dynamic had changed. I wasn't just Emily, the quiet sister who always gave in. I was Emily, the woman who'd walked away from a confrontation with her head held high, who'd outsmarted her sister and exposed her lies, who'd found herself in a position of strength for once. And when Alexander walked me to my car at the end of the night, he kissed me gently on the cheek and said, "If your sister gives you any more trouble, let me know." "I will," I said. And I meant it. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, all from Gabriella. The messages ranged from angry to desperate to threatening. She accused me of sabotaging her, of humiliating her, of ruining her life. She demanded I call her back immediately. She insisted we needed to talk. She claimed I'd gone too far. I deleted every single message without responding. Then I got ready for work, made coffee, and checked my email. There was one from the estate lawyer confirming that all paperwork related to Dad's house had been finalized. The sale was complete. The funds were officially and legally mine. There was no avenue for Gabriella to contest anything anymore. It was over. I allowed myself a moment of relief, a moment to breathe. And then I went about my day. At Driftline Construction, I managed back-to-back meetings about upcoming projects, coordinated with suppliers, and handled the usual chaos that came with keeping construction sites running smoothly. My boss, a gruff but fair man named Walter, pulled me aside during lunch. "Everything okay, Emily? You seem distracted." "Just some family stuff," I said. "Nothing I can't handle." "Family's always complicated," he said, nodding knowingly. "But if you need time off, just let me know." "Thanks, Walter. I appreciate it." At lunchtime, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Hello." "Emily, this is Victor." I stiffened. "What do you want?" "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "For last night. I didn't know the full situation. Your sister lied to me. Made it sound like you owed her money and were refusing to pay. I wouldn't have shown up if I'd known the truth." "Apology accepted," I said carefully. "But why are you calling me?" "Because Alexander told me you're important to him," Victor said. "And I don't want there to be bad blood. I made a mistake. I own that. But I also want you to know that your sister's been calling me non-stop since last night, trying to get me to finish the job. She's offering me more money, promises, whatever she thinks will work. I just wanted you to know I'm not interested." "Good to know," I said. "Thank you for the heads up." "Also," he added, "Alexander wants me to pass along a message. If Gabriella contacts you again, let him know. He's handling things on his end." "Handling things how?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Just trust that she won't be a problem much longer," Victor said. And then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, processing what he'd said. Alexander was handling things. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but something told me I'd find out soon enough. That evening, I met Alexander again, this time at a quieter restaurant on the outskirts of town called the Copper Spoon. He greeted me with a hug and a kiss, and we settled into a booth near the back. "How was your day?" he asked. "Eventful," I said. "Victor called me." Alexander raised an eyebrow. Did he? He apologized. Said Gabriella's been trying to get him to keep pressuring me. He told her no. Good, Alexander said. Because I told him if he went near you again, we'd have a serious problem. What kind of problem? I asked, half joking. The kind that ends with him looking for a new line of work, Alexander said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. I nodded slowly. Thank you. For looking out for me. It's not just about looking out for you, he said, his expression serious. It's about respect. Your sister disrespected you. She disrespected me by involving one of my people in her scheme without my knowledge. That's not something I let slide. So what happens now? I asked. He smiled faintly. Now? We let her dig her own grave. I didn't fully understand what he meant until 2 days later when Gabriella showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, mascara smudged, hair disheveled, looking like she hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaking. No, we don't, I replied, starting to close the door. She shoved her foot in the doorway. Please, Emily. Just give me 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in my living room, wringing her hands, looking more desperate than I'd ever seen her. What do you want, Gabriella? I need your help, she said. I'm in trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that involves people you don't want to owe money to, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I borrowed money from the wrong people. A lot of money. And now they're coming after me. I crossed my arms. And you thought bringing Victor to intimidate me was going to solve that problem? I thought if I could get you to split the inheritance, I could pay them back, she said. I thought it was the only way. Did you ever think about just asking me? I said. Did you ever think about being honest? About explaining the situation and seeing if I'd help? Would you have? She asked, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading. I hesitated. Honestly? Probably not. Not after everything she'd put me through. Not after years of lies and manipulation and being treated like an ATM. But the fact that she'd never even tried, that she'd gone straight to threats and intimidation, told me everything I needed to know. It doesn't matter now, I said. You made your choice. And now, you have to live with it. Emily, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared. These people don't mess around. If I don't pay them back, I don't know what they'll do. I felt a flicker of sympathy. Despite everything, she was still my sister. But sympathy wasn't enough to make me forget everything she'd done, everything she'd put me through. Then you need to figure it out, I said firmly. Because I'm not bailing you out. Not this time. Not ever again. She stared at me, disbelief and anger warring on her face. You're really going to let them come after me? I'm not letting them do anything, I said. You borrowed money you couldn't pay back. You made deals with people you shouldn't have trusted. You lied to me, to Victor, to everyone. This is your mess, Gabriella. You clean it up. She stood there for a long moment, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And then, without another word, she turned and walked out of my apartment. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt relieved. And part of me felt absolutely nothing at all. That night, I called Alexander and told him about Gabriella's visit. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he said, She won't bother you again. How can you be sure? I asked. Because I've made arrangements, he said simply. Her debts are being taken care of. She won't owe anyone anything by the end of the week. I blinked. You're paying off her debts. In a manner of speaking, he said. But she won't know it came from me. As far as she'll know, it's a one-time amnesty from the people she owes, a gift. And it comes with a very clear message. stay away from you. If she contacts you again, the deal's off, and the debts come back with interest." I sat there in stunned silence. "Why would you do that?" "Because you don't need that stress hanging over you," he said. "And because I don't like people who use family as leverage. Your sister crossed a line. This is me making sure she doesn't cross it again." "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just know that you're protected. And so is what's yours." We talked for a while longer. And by the time I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Months, even. For the first time since Dad died, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the next crisis, without waiting for Gabriella's next scheme, without constantly looking over my shoulder. A week passed with no contact from Gabriella. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, just silence. And in that silence, I started to rebuild my life. I paid off my student loans, which had been hanging over me since college. I invested a portion of the inheritance in a diversified portfolio that my financial advisor recommended. I took a long weekend trip to Colorado to visit old friends I hadn't seen in years. I started therapy to work through the complicated grief and family trauma I'd been carrying for so long. And through it all, Alexander was there. Not hovering, not controlling, but present, supportive. He'd text to check in, invite me to dinner, send flowers to my office just because. He was everything Gabriella had never been: reliable, honest, and genuinely invested in my well-being. One evening, about 3 weeks after the dinner disaster, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Hello?" "Emily, it's me." Gabriella's voice was small, defeated. "What do you want?" I asked, my guard immediately up. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "For everything. For the dinner, for Victor, for all of it. I was desperate, and I made terrible choices. I know you don't owe me anything, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just listened to her breathe on the other end of the line. "Thank you for the apology," I said finally. "But it doesn't change anything." "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed to say it. Gabriella, I hope you figure your life out. I really do. But I can't be part of it anymore. I can't keep being the person you turn to when things go wrong. I can't keep being your safety net. I need to focus on my own life now." "I understand," she said. "Goodbye, Emily." "Goodbye, Gabriella." I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. And then I deleted her number. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just out of necessity, because holding on to her, to the hope that she'd change, to the idea that we could somehow have a normal sibling relationship, was only hurting me. And I was done hurting myself for other people. A month later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Gabriella had moved to Austin, Texas. She'd found a job in pharmaceutical sales at a different company, was renting a modest apartment, and was, by all accounts, keeping her head down and staying out of trouble. I was glad for her, genuinely, but I didn't reach out. I didn't try to reconnect. I just let her go and moved on with my life. Alexander and I grew closer. What had started as casual drinks turned into regular dates, which turned into something more serious. He introduced me to his friends, his business associates, and even some of his family members who visited from overseas. And I introduced him to the life I was building for myself. A life that didn't revolve around drama or manipulation or family dysfunction. A life that was mine, built on my own terms, funded by money I'd earned through years of sacrifice and care. One night, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Tulsa, he asked me if I regretted how things had gone down with Gabriella. "No," I said without hesitation. "I don't." "Not even a little?" he pressed. Not even a little, I confirmed. She made her choices. I made mine. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. That's not something I'll ever regret. He smiled and kissed my temple. Good. You deserve to put yourself first. And he was right. I did. I thought about that dinner at Rustic Table often. The moment Victor walked in. The moment Gabriella tried to intimidate me into signing that paper. The moment I laughed in her face because I knew something she didn't. And I thought about how far I'd come from being the younger sister who always gave in, who always bent, who always let Gabriella have her way. I'd become someone who stood her ground, someone who knew her worth, someone who wouldn't be pushed around anymore. Dad would have been proud. I was certain of that. He'd left me that inheritance not just because I'd cared for him, but because he'd known I'd use it wisely. He'd known I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of me. He'd known I was strong enough to stand on my own. And he'd been right. 3 months after the restaurant incident, I was thriving in ways I never had before. My work at Driftline Construction had picked up significantly. Walter promoted me to Senior Logistics Coordinator, which came with a raise and more responsibility. I was managing 3 major construction projects simultaneously, coordinating with suppliers across multiple states, and earning the respect of contractors who'd initially been skeptical of my capabilities. My personal life was equally fulfilling. Alexander and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We saw each other several times a week, took weekend trips to nearby cities, and talked about the future in a way that felt both exciting and natural. He never pressured me, never tried to control me, and always made it clear that my independence was something he admired rather than threatened by. One evening in late October, Alexander invited me to dinner at his home. He lived in a beautifully restored Victorian house on the outskirts of Tulsa, with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. He cooked for me that night. A traditional Eastern European meal that he explained had been passed down through his family for generations. "This is incredible," I said, savoring the rich flavors of the braised beef and roasted vegetables. "I'm glad you like it," he said, smiling. "My grandmother would have approved." We talked about everything and nothing. About his childhood in a country he rarely named but described in vivid detail. About my memories of Dad before he got sick. About the dreams we had for ourselves, both individually and together. And then, toward the end of the meal, he grew serious. "I need to tell you something about your sister," he said. I set down my fork. "What about her?" "She's been making inquiries, asking around about you, about me, about how you and I know each other." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of inquiries?" "Nothing dangerous," he assured me quickly. "Just curious. But it suggests she's not as willing to let things go as she claimed." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "I just wanted you to be aware. I've got people keeping an eye on the situation. If she becomes a problem, we'll handle it." I nodded slowly. Part of me wasn't surprised. Gabriella had never been good at accepting defeat. But another part of me was disappointed. I genuinely hoped she'd moved on, that her apology had been sincere, that we could both live our separate lives in peace. "She's not going to let this go, is she?" I said. "Probably not," Alexander admitted. "But that's her problem, not yours. It becomes my problem if she keeps trying to insert herself into my life. Then we make sure she understands the consequences of doing that," he said simply. I appreciated his protectiveness, but I also knew I couldn't rely on him to fight all my battles. At some point, I needed to make it clear to Gabriella, once and for all, that I was done. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, I was grocery shopping at a store near my apartment when I saw her. Gabriella was standing in the produce section, examining avocados like she had all the time in the world. She looked better than she had during her desperate visit to my apartment. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, her clothes expensive. She looked like the Gabriella I remembered from before everything fell apart. I considered turning around and leaving, avoiding the confrontation entirely. But something in me refused to run. I'd spent too long being intimidated by her, too long letting her dictate the terms of our relationship. Not anymore. I walked up to her. "Gabriella." She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Emily. I didn't know you shopped here." "I live a few blocks away," I said. "What are you doing in Tulsa? I thought you moved to Austin." "I did," she said quickly. "I'm just visiting. For work." "For work," I repeated, not believing her for a second. She set down the avocado and turned to face me fully. "Look, I know things between us are complicated, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I need to figure out my own life. And I have been. I'm doing better. I really am." "That's great," I said, my tone neutral. "I'm happy for you." "Are you?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Because I feel like you don't believe me." "What I believe doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you're taking care of yourself and staying out of trouble." She nodded, but I could see the frustration simmering beneath her composed exterior. "I heard you're dating someone important." There it was, the real reason she was here. "I am," I said. "His name is Alexander. And yes, he's important to me." "Is he important in other ways too?" she pressed. "What are you really asking, Gabriella?" She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I'm asking if the guy you're dating is the reason Victor backed off. If he's the reason my debts mysteriously disappeared." I held her gaze. "If someone helped you out of a bad situation, maybe you should be grateful instead of digging for information you don't need." "I just want to understand what's going on," she said. "What's going on is that you got a second chance," I said firmly. "Don't waste it by making the same mistakes again." Gabriella's expression hardened. "You think you're so smart now, don't you? You think because you have some powerful boyfriend that you're untouchable." "I think I'm finally standing up for myself," I said. "Something I should have done a long time ago." "You've always been weak, Emily. Always letting people walk all over you, and now you think one inheritance and one relationship changes who you are?" Her words were designed to hurt, to cut through my newfound confidence and drag me back to the insecure woman I used to be. But they didn't work. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. "You're right," I said calmly. "I used to let people walk all over me, especially you. But I'm done with that. I'm done letting you take from me. I'm done letting you make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. And I'm done pretending we have some sisterly bond that justifies the way you've treated me." "So that's it?" she said, her voice rising. "You're just going to cut me out of your life completely?" "You cut yourself out," I said. "The moment you brought Victor to that restaurant. The moment you tried to intimidate me into signing away what was rightfully mine. The moment you chose manipulation over honesty. I was desperate. And I've been desperate too," I shot back. "Desperate for you to treat me with even a fraction of the respect I deserved. Desperate for you to acknowledge all the times I helped you, supported you, gave you money I couldn't afford to lose. But you never did. You just took, and never once said thank you." People were starting to stare. Other shoppers were slowing down, pretending to examine products while clearly eavesdropping on our conversation. I didn't care. Let them hear. Let them see Gabriella for who she really was. "I'm sorry, okay?" she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I wasn't there for Dad. I'm sorry I treated you badly. I'm sorry I tried to force you to give me money. I'm sorry for everything." "Sorry isn't enough," I said quietly. "Sorry doesn't undo years of hurt. Sorry doesn't erase the lies or the manipulation. Sorry is just a word, Gabriella. And you've said it before without ever meaning it. She wiped at her eyes, smudging her perfect makeup. So what do you want from me? Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to leave me alone. Let me live my life. Let me be happy. Stop trying to insert yourself back in when you've made it clear you only care about what I can give you. That's not true, she protested. Isn't it? You didn't come to Tulsa for work. You came because you heard I was dating someone connected, and you wanted to see if you could use that connection somehow. You're still looking for an angle, Gabriella. You're still trying to figure out how to benefit from my life. She opened her mouth to deny it, but no words came out. Because we both knew I was right. I picked up my shopping basket. Goodbye, Gabriella. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But you won't find it with me. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the produce section, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. When I got home, I called Alexander and told him about the encounter. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he said, "You handled that perfectly." It didn't feel perfect, I admitted. It felt messy and uncomfortable. Most important conversations do, he said. But you set a clear boundary. You told her exactly where things stand. That's all you can do. What if she keeps trying? I asked. Then we deal with it, he said. But my guess is she got the message. You made it clear there's nothing for her to gain by continuing to pursue you. She'll move on eventually. I hoped he was right. Over the following weeks, I heard nothing from Gabriella. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It seemed she'd finally accepted that our relationship was over. I focused on work, on my relationship with Alexander, on building the life I'd always wanted but never thought I could have. Walter at Driftline Construction assigned me to lead a major project, a new commercial complex being built on the north side of Tulsa. It was the biggest responsibility I'd ever been given, and I threw myself into it completely. The project was complex, involving dozens of contractors, hundreds of deliveries, and tight deadlines that left no room for error. But I thrived under the pressure. I coordinated logistics like a conductor leading an orchestra, ensuring every piece fell into place at exactly the right moment. Walter watched from the sidelines, occasionally offering advice but mostly letting me handle things on my own. You're a natural at this, he told me one afternoon as we surveyed the construction site. I should have promoted you years ago. Better late than never, I said, smiling. I'm serious, Emily. You've got a real future in this industry. I could see you running your own firm someday. The idea intrigued me. Running my own business, being my own boss, building something from the ground up that was entirely mine. It felt like a natural extension of everything I'd been working toward. 4 months after the grocery store encounter, I got an unexpected call from the same mutual acquaintance who told me about Gabriella's move to Austin. Emily, I thought you should know. Gabriella's been asking about you again, specifically about your relationship with Alexander. What's she saying? I asked. She's telling people that you're in some kind of dangerous relationship. That Alexander is involved in criminal activity and you're going to get hurt. She's basically trying to make you look naive or stupid for being with him. I felt anger flare in my chest. She's spreading rumors about me? And about him, the acquaintance confirmed. I don't know if she's trying to sabotage your relationship or just cause drama, but I thought you should know. I thanked her for the information and immediately called Alexander. When I told him what Gabriella was doing, his response was calm, but firm. Let her talk, he said. People who know me won't believe her, and people who don't know me don't matter. But she's trying to ruin your reputation, I protested. She's trying to ruin yours, he corrected. She wants to make you look foolish for trusting me. She wants to create doubt in your mind about our relationship, Don't let her. He was right, of course. This was Gabriella's last-ditch attempt to insert herself into my life, to create chaos, to make me second-guess my choices. But I wasn't going to let her succeed. I spent the next week quietly reaching out to people Gabriella had spoken to, calmly explaining the situation and providing context. I didn't trash-talk my sister or get defensive. I simply told the truth. That Gabriella and I had a complicated relationship, that she'd been unhappy with how our father's estate was settled, and that she was now trying to create problems in my personal life as retaliation. Most people were sympathetic. They'd heard enough stories over the years to know that family drama could be messy and complicated. And those who knew Alexander vouched for his character without me even having to ask. Within 2 weeks, Gabriella's rumor campaign had fizzled out completely. The few people who'd been willing to listen to her gossip quickly lost interest when they realized there was no substance to her claims. And then, one evening in early spring, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard Gabriella's voice on the other end. "Emily, please don't hang up." I considered it. But curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Gabriella?" "I need you to know that I'm done," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm done fighting with you. I'm done trying to get something from you. I'm done with all of it." "Good," I said simply. "I'm also calling to tell you that I'm moving. Not just to another city, but out of state. I got a job offer in Seattle. It's a fresh start, a chance to get away from all of this." "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. "I know you don't believe me, but I really am sorry for everything. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better." "I hope you succeed," I said. "I really do. But Gabriella, I need you to understand something. Even if you become the best version of yourself, even if you completely turn your life around, that doesn't mean we'll ever have a relationship again. Too much has happened. Too much damage has been done." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking you to know that I'm sorry." "Okay," I said. "I hear you." We talked for a few more minutes, and then she said goodbye. It was the most civil conversation we'd had in years. And when I hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness, exactly. But acceptance. Acceptance that our relationship was over, and that was okay. I told Alexander about the call later that night. We were sitting on his porch, watching the stars come out, when I recounted the entire conversation. "Do you believe her?" he asked. "I think she believes herself," I said. "Whether she actually follows through remains to be seen. But it doesn't matter to me anymore. She's not my responsibility." "Good," he said, pulling me closer. "You deserve to focus on your own life." And that's exactly what I did. Over the next year, my life continued to improve in ways I'd never imagined. The commercial complex project was completed on time and under budget, earning me recognition throughout the industry. Walter made good on his promise to help me launch my own logistics consulting firm. And within 6 months, I had 3 major clients and a growing reputation for excellence. Alexander and I got engaged on a rainy evening in November. He proposed in his living room with no fanfare or elaborate setup. Just the two of us, a simple ring, and a question that I answered without hesitation. We married the following spring in a small ceremony with close friends and family. His family, not mine. Gabriella wasn't invited, and I didn't feel even a twinge of guilt about it. This was my day, my life, my choice. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized that the moment I laughed at that restaurant table wasn't just defiance. It was the beginning of a new version of myself, a version who knew her worth. A version who wouldn't be pushed around. A version who chose her own happiness over maintaining peace with people who didn't deserve it. Years later, I heard through a friend of a friend that Gabriella had indeed moved to Seattle. She'd struggled at first, facing financial difficulties and professional setbacks. But eventually, she found stable work and began rebuilding her life. She dated a few people, none seriously. And by all accounts, she'd become more humble, more careful, more aware of the consequences of her actions. But I never reached out. Never sent a congratulations or checked in to see how she was doing. Some bridges once burned should stay burned. Some relationships once broken aren't meant to be repaired. And I was at peace with that. Gabriella paid for her manipulations in ways both large and small. The debts that Alexander had paid off came with strings attached. Strings that ensured she could never approach me again without severe financial consequences. The rumors she'd spread about me and Alexander backfired spectacularly, damaging her own reputation among the people who'd once been willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. And the inheritance she'd fought so hard to steal from me? She never saw a penny. Meanwhile, I'd used that money to build a life that was successful, fulfilling, and entirely on my own terms. As I stood in my consulting firm's office one afternoon, looking out at the Tulsa skyline, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the anger, the fear, the triumph. All of it had shaped me into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who knew that revenge wasn't always about destroying your enemy. Sometimes, it was about building a life so good that their absence from it was its own punishment. I smiled, turned away from the window and got back to work. Because that's what survivors do. We build. We grow. We thrive. And we never, ever look back.